Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to Just Law on IQRA TV. Just before the break, we were looking at spouse applications and in particular the problem areas that we need to focus on in order to be aware of where we could go wrong. But before we go into that, let's take our next call. Hello, Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam. I just tuned in and you were mentioning divorce, and I thought it's an opportunity to me to ask you a question, especially regarding the obviously English law system and also the Islamic law system. Sharia councils are obviously arbitrating and bringing about divorce between husband and wife.
Of course,
The recent precedents have been regarding English law is that the courts cannot divorce the wife without obtaining the husband's consent, just on the grounds of irretrievable broken down. So I wanted to ask you, obviously you're very knowledgeable and experienced in this, would the Sharia councils also have to apply that in their decisions?
Well, look, as far as Sharia councils are concerned, my understanding is they can only obviously deal with matters from a religious perspective. So they can only deal with the position under Islamic law. Now, the way Sharia councils operate at the moment is that if the requirements under Sharia law are met, then obviously they'll grant the divorce, or if it's an application for a khula, they'll grant the khula. So they will apply their own criteria, and then if the criteria is met for the divorce or the khula, they will go ahead and then then finalize the matter, issue any certificates that need to be issued.
Can I interject?
Yeah, of course you can. Yeah, of course you can.
Yeah, they obviously, I hear what you're saying, they will all apply their own criteria. This is the issue for the Muslim community, and something is they've all got different criteria. They haven't got any similar criteria. So I'm just thinking, but they all do say they have to respect the law of the land.
Yes.
So because the law of the land is here, maybe the criteria of the law of the land could bring some clarity to their criteria.
I'm not a scholar, but the problem is this, isn't it? The problem is both systems are completely different in terms of how they operate, in terms of the criteria that leads to the divorce being, the marriage being dissolved. On the one hand,
with respect, wouldn't both systems require knowledge from both parties, some kind of reconciliation procedure, some kind of arbitration procedure? And they'd require a procedure where notice is served for both parties.
I think the Jewish community, they have a system where I think their divorces will be accepted by the courts, but we don't have that system within the Muslim community. But at the moment, we haven't reached that stage where there's a uniform system for all Sharia councils, and certainly we haven't reached the stage where there's a way of harmonizing the process that Sharia councils go through and the English divorce system, the civil courts.
So in that sense, it's in our own interest to have ourselves regulated by our own selves before we're done by somebody that isn't.
It would be, but the problem always is this, isn't it, with our community, is that we all have our own systems, we all have our own way of dealing with it, is to bring all the different Sharia councils together. And I don't know what efforts have been made under one umbrella organization, and I'm no expert in this. I suspect it's quite a difficult thing to do. But obviously, if there's standard practice, if there's a standard process, a standard criteria which is used, that standard good practice, code of conduct, etc., that can only be a good thing. But in practice, how easy is it to try and get all the different Sharia councils to work together? I don't know what efforts are being made to do that. I mean, that's certainly one thing, which is the point you're making. Completely agree, it's a valid point. But the next point is, will we ever get to a stage where if you've gone through a proper process to get an Islamic divorce from a Sharia council, will we ever get to a situation where that will be accepted by the English courts? I suspect I can't see that happening anytime soon, with the negative sort of view that a lot of people have in the wider community as far as Sharia courts are concerned, giving Sharia courts legitimacy under English law. I just can't see that happening at the moment. Who knows? Who knows?
Thank you.
Sorry, brilliant. Thank you. Thank you very much for your call. Thank you very much for your call indeed. So, so one of the things that we were looking at, certainly in terms of problem areas when one is making a spouse application, is with previous marriages. So somebody is applying for a spouse visa to come to the United Kingdom, and they have been married before, or their husband or wife who's in the United Kingdom, they've been married before. The issue that arises is, if they've been married before, have those marriages been properly brought to an end in such a way that the English law, the English system, under the English law system, those marriages are considered as having concluded and the matter resolved by way of a divorce. Now, it touches on what the caller was saying just before, just the last caller was saying, that we've got Sharia councils here. One of the problems that arises is that where somebody in the United Kingdom who had an Islamic marriage, let's say in Pakistan, and now the marriage hasn't worked out, and they've obtained an Islamic divorce from the Sharia Council, they've got a khula from the Sharia Council, they've got a certificate signed, stamped, properly been done. The sort of understanding that a lot of people have is that, look, I had an Islamic marriage and now I've got an Islamic divorce, so I don't really need to do anything more. I should be able to get married and sponsor my husband or wife to come back to the United Kingdom. Problem is this, that although that Sharia Council divorce is acceptable, let's say in Pakistan, in order to get married again, when you move to the next stage where the person who's abroad, the husband or wife who's abroad, is making an application to come to the UK, immigration authorities won't accept that Sharia Council divorce as a valid divorce. They will want a proper divorce. When I say proper, I'm not saying that Sharia Council divorce is not proper, but a divorce which has been concluded, which has been recognised under English law, which in most cases does mean that the person, in addition to having done the Sharia Council divorce, will, for the purposes of immigration law, for purposes of sponsoring their husband or wife to come to the United Kingdom, will have to go through the divorce process through the county court or the family court in the United Kingdom. So, we'll have to apply for divorce, and the whole process of serving the divorce papers on the former partner, getting the decree nisi, getting the decree absolute, the whole process, which takes 4 or 5 months in total, that will be a process that they will need to follow. Either do that, or if their husband or wife, their former husband or wife, they're still in their home country, they can use the court system in that home country in order to obtain a divorce. But the reality is, though there are exceptions, the rules are quite complicated on divorces as far as immigration law is concerned. But in reality, in addition to Sharia Council divorces, they will invariably need a divorce which has been obtained through the country's legal system. And obviously here it's through the civil courts or the family courts. So that's a big problem area because in many cases what does happen is people don't realize that this needs to be done. The other problem that occurs is that it could be that somebody's had a Sharia Council divorce, they've then gone back to, let's say for example, Pakistan, and then they've married, they've got their nikah nama, it's been registered at the Nadra office, so that's fantastic, that's all formal. And the actual civil law divorce, initially the Sharia Council divorce has been done, the actual civil divorce then takes place many months later, and by that time they've entered into their second marriage. In those circumstances, I've seen many cases where immigration officers have taken the view that that second marriage although valid for the purposes of Islamic law and it's valid, recognized in that country, but as far as immigration law is concerned, that marriage won't be recognized, because at the time of that marriage, the person was still legally married to somebody else, because they had only gone through a Sharia council divorce, and that, according to their eyes, is not sufficient. The proper divorce would have taken place many, many months later, and by that time the second marriage had taken place in Pakistan. So that can cause problems. The second problem area that one comes across is the issue about previous marriages and how those marriages have been brought to an end, and whether that divorce that's been done has been done in such a way that it is recognized by the immigration authorities. So on the one hand, first point we looked at, which we haven't looked at in previous shows, is the issue about somebody having a problematic immigration history, where they've been to the UK before, they've had problems, they've gone back. So that can cause a problem. The second very common problem that you come across is where somebody is marrying for the second time. They've had previous marriages, and there's an issue over whether the first marriage has been brought to an end in a way that is recognised by UK immigration and UK English law. So that's another very, very common problem area that you come across. Now, the sort of third problem area, and these are sort of unusual cases, but one does come across these cases quite often. The third sort of problem that arises is where the parties that are getting married, invariably it applies to the UK sponsor. The sponsor may not be well. So it may well be that the sponsor in the UK suffers from some kind of disability, is unwell, and getting married abroad. So again, it's one of those cases where you need to be extra careful. The Home Office may take the view that actually what's happening here is that either the sponsor doesn't have the capacity to marry, or all that's happening here is that it's not really a situation where there's a real marriage. All that's happening is somebody is sponsoring somebody to come over. On paper, the person is a wife, but in reality, somebody's coming over to care for the sponsor in the UK who's unwell. Again, that's another problem area that you need to look at if the circumstances are such, and that can be dealt with by maybe obtaining a letter from the doctor, a supporting letter saying, you know, sponsor's really happy to get married, etc., fit enough to get married, etc. So maybe that's the way that can be dealt with. So there's some of the sort of more unusual cases that one comes across. That then leads me on to the sort of typical problem areas that you encounter on a very frequent basis, which is to do with the income requirement. Now, this is something that we've looked at length on previous shows, and in my experience, the problem that arises here is with the requirements not being fulfilled because the documents that need to be submitted aren't being submitted. So let's take, for example, let's just look at some broad areas and not specific requirements today. Typical problem is, let's say somebody is working and earning 18,600, so the income's there. So the problem that you might come across, very, very common, is that they don't submit all their wage slips, or they don't submit an employment letter, or there's a problem with their bank statement. So it's not the case that people aren't earning enough money. The problem in a lot of cases is the documentary evidence that needs to be submitted isn't being submitted. And in previous shows, we've looked at more complex applications where somebody is self-employed or somebody is operating a limited company, etc. Again, the documentary requirements for those kind of applications are quite extensive, and it's important that those requirements are fulfilled. There are very detailed guidance notes on the internet. Lawyers can advise you on that if they specialize in this area. And in a lot of these cases where somebody's tried to do it themselves, or they've used an agent who's not experienced in one's home country, whether it's India or Pakistan, and they've simply got it wrong because they're not familiar with the strict requirements. So it's not always the case that the requirements aren't being met. The problem is the documentary evidence that needs to be submitted to show that the 18,600 requirement can be fulfilled. It's the documentary evidence which is not being submitted, which is another very, very common problem. So you've got problems with somebody with a difficult immigration history, somebody who has problems with their documentary evidence, somebody who's been married before. So there are certain problem areas that one needs to look at. Now, we don't have that much time, so one of the final areas that I want to look at is with relationships, because one of the requirements that needs to be fulfilled, in addition to finances, accommodation, is not only that you're married, but you have to demonstrate that your relationship is subsisting. So it's not enough just to say, yep, we are married, we got married last year, and here's the marriage certificate. The Home Office wants to see more than that. They want to see that the relationship is genuine and subsisting. And that's another problem area, especially where the parties have been married for a significant period of time. So for example, where the parties have been married, let's say for 5 years, for whatever reason, they haven't made an application to come to the UK, or applications have been made and the application has been refused. Okay, but the key thing here is that there's a significant gap between the parties getting married and the application being made for the husband or wife to come to the United Kingdom. That in itself throws up a number of problems, because as far as the Home Office is concerned, as I said at the outset, they're not simply interested in you demonstrating that the marriage has taken place. They want to know that after the marriage took place, the relationship has continued. And where somebody has married in the last few months and is applying now for a visa, and there's a very small gap between the marriage and the application for a visa, it's not too difficult to demonstrate. Few records of phone calls and messages may be submitted, and that may well be submitted, and that may well be enough. The problem arises, let's say for example, where somebody's been married for 5 years. What the Home Office wants to see is that the marriage has subsisted over that 5-year period. So the Home Office wants to look at, has the husband or wife in the UK gone back to their home country to meet their husband or wife? How regularly have they gone? How long have they stayed there? In terms of the contact that the parties have they been talking on the phone? What kind of documentary evidence is there which demonstrates that they have been talking on the phone? In terms of messages, have they been messaging each other? What kind of documentary evidence is there to support that? Let's say for example, the husband might be in the UK. Has he been sending money back to his or her wife, in the home country? What documentary evidence is there of that? Now, it becomes difficult because a lot of people won't retain their records for 5 years. And what the Home Office wants to see is that there are records there for five years. Let's take our next call and we'll return to this.
Okay. Jazakallah.
Ji, hello, assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
Ji. Ji, you're live on air. Ji, what's your question?
Yeah. Like I asked you last time,
Yep, okay.
if there are two parties, they have got two solicitors.
Yep, okay.
And if they breach the confidentiality,
Yep.
like the party A's solicitor send them a letter
Yep.
with party A's address on
Yes, I understand. Yep.
to solicitor of party B, and party B's solicitor send that to his client.
Yep. Yep.
What can my friend do?
But you know, party B's solicitor, do you think the party B's solicitor realized that this was confidential? So when party B's solicitor sent the information on to the client, did party B's solicitor know that this should have been confidential? or do you think the Party B solicitor wouldn't have known that?
I don't know. I mean, they are solicitors, they should know.
Right, okay. Now, what kind of information was passed on by Party A to Party B? What kind of information was it?
Party A's address.
Okay, because was the address on divorce proceedings or what was it on?
Yeah, I don't know what was it.
Okay.
But she told me that her daughter said that that her ex told her that the solicitor sent that letter to him.
Okay, all right. Well, look, I think practically, because and I think we've had this discussion before, that the ex-partner has now got this information, so really there's nothing that can be done about that. But it may well be that there are a number of options if she does want to pursue this in terms of, I think we've discussed this before, complaint to the firm internally as to why this happened.
No, can I tell you something?
Mm-hmm.
My friend's mummy's best friend's nephew was supporting her, and he spent £17,000.
Right.
And she was so worried.
Mm.
Now he doesn't want to help her. She hasn't got any money.
Okay.
And she was really so sad. I said, don't worry. I'll ask you.
Yeah, okay.
And whatever you say, because I thought we should take them to court.
Yeah. So the starting point is complaint internally. So if the complaint doesn't resolve anything, you can complain to the Solicitors Regulation Authority or the Ombudsman, who deals, legal ombudsman, who deals with this one. Yeah. Because the legal ombudsman can say, if the legal ombudsman finds that the solicitor has done something wrong, the ombudsman can say that there will be a sum that will be paid to your friend as compensation. So internal complaint, Solicitors Regulation Authority, legal ombudsman, these are normally what the things that you can do. Now the other thing that can be done is there may be an issue over data protection and the disclosure of data which is confidential. So one other option is, if you go onto the website for the Information Commissioner, it could be that your friend can complain to the Information Commissioner, because here what we've got is confidential data which has been disclosed to a party when it shouldn't have been disclosed. So there are a range of options which I know you're saying that your friend has limited or no money now, but these avenues don't require monetary expenditure. An internal complaint doesn't require any fees having to be paid to anybody. Complaint to the SRA, legal ombudsman, again doesn't need any fees to be paid. And then finally, this other avenue is looking at whether you can complain to the Information Commissioner. So there are a number of options open to your friend if she's not happy.
I'm worried about her, you know.
Right. No, I understand. But look, these are the things. Now, if you're thinking, oh, if there's a danger of domestic abuse or violence or anything of that nature, then there are two options again. One is report the matter to the police if any threats are made, if the person turns up at her house and she feels threatened, report the matter to the police. Now, the other option is that she can get, if she is threatened, she can get an injunction against him to stop him from coming to the home address. Only problem with the injunction is if you need to use lawyers, that may cost a bit of money. But look, there are a range of options here, from complaining about the solicitor having done something wrong, and then secondly, practically, if you're saying she is worried and if you're saying that there's a potential risk to her, then there are ways of dealing with that through the police or potentially through getting an injunction against her. But look, these are really...
The police has already done that.
Yeah. Well then, look, if it happens again, you've got to report it to the police, or the other option is getting an injunction against him. The only problem with injunction is that does cost money. If she qualifies for legal aid, then try and use a legal aid lawyer. But really, those are the options open to your friend. And I think we've looked at this in detail before. Unfortunately, that does bring us to the end of the show. Inshallah, we'll be back next week on Monday at 6 o'clock. Until then, Assalamu alaikum.